Next up, we have a panel discussion regarding data traffic growth, security, network and solutions, role of operators and wholesale carriers. We'll be covering the topics growing bandwidth needs and projections, cloud connectivity and its growth, network security centers and planning, and software-defined networking in the WAN. I'd like to call on the panelists. Mr. Jasmin Al Awadi, VP of Network Infrastructure and Services of DO. Mr. Eric Handa, CEO of APTelecom. Mr. Fahd Suleman, VP of Pre-Sales, Product and Services, GBI. Mr. Kevin Vachon, COO of MEF. Mr. Mike van den Bergh, CMO of PCCW Global. And welcome the moderator, Mr. Jeff Seal, Managing Partner of Telecom Review, North America.
Thanks to all our panelists here. I appreciate you staying during the day because I think it's going to be a great and exciting panel from the perspective of some of the information we're going to give. I'm going to start out, if you would please, just going down the row, introduce yourself, 2 minutes, what you do and what your company does. Mike, we'll start with you.
Okay, thanks, Jeff. Is this thing on? Yeah. So Mike van den Bergh, I'm the Chief Marketing Officer of PCCW Global. Those of you who were here earlier would have heard our CEO speaking, Mark Holtfinger, and I think he already probably gave you a very good outline of our role as a global service provider. And obviously, particularly in the context of this, we're a major part of the global internet. We carry, on average, we estimate around about 15% of the total internet traffic hits our network around the world. And obviously along the way, what we're now looking to do is to effectively expand the interaction that we have using technologies like SDN, NFV, and so on, and also how we secure that from the sort of changing demands and the changing threats that we're seeing across the market. Obviously, we work very closely with pretty well every network provider around the world. So that's one of the key challenges to do that.
Good, thank you. Kevin?
Sure. Kevin Vachon, COO of MEF, been doing this for 10 years now. I did a little intro to MEF a bit earlier. We're an industry association, been around 15 years, currently focusing on developing specifications and open implementations, reference implementations for dynamic services. We've developed a framework for orchestration of connectivity services across multi-provider networks and bringing to market a number of open APIs in the spring and summertime. We have about 130 contributing service provider members to MEF as part of our membership over a couple of hundred companies.
Yes, sir.
Good. My name is Jasmin Al Awadi. I am the Vice President of Network Infrastructure and Services from DO. I handle mainly the fixed access network plus the IP network and the data center rollout and the fiber optic network within DO. We are the second telecom provider in United Arab Emirates. We provide all kinds of services, whether it is mobile, IPTV, and fixed services as well. And I would like that we'll have a nice discussion today in this panel.
Good, thank you. Fahd?
Hi, my name is Fahd Suleman. I'm the Vice President of Pre-Sales Product and Services at GBI, Gulfbridge International. You may or may not know about us, but I'm assuming you do. We're a global wholesale provider of capacity service that has been on a transformational journey moving into products and services catered towards the cloud. It's been an interesting and challenging journey, to be honest. I've been here for the past 3 years, and we're probably going to talk a little bit about those interesting tidbits as we go along the rest of the session.
Yep. Eric.
Thanks. Eric Handa with APTelecom. We're a submarine cable consulting company. We're only 12 people, very small, about $3 million in revenue. But some of our customers may be of interest to you. We've done about $220 million of pre-sales. Folks like Microsoft, Facebook, Apple, Amazon are buying from our end customers. We're currently doing 7 systems around the world. Hawaii Cable System between Los Angeles and Sydney is a customer of APTelecom. Angola Cables, which is building between Angola and Brazil to the United States, is our client. We've been with them for the last 5 years. We've been working on their Pan-African strategy for their co-location, their IX. They're the 3rd largest IX right now in Europe, in Africa. Hawaii Telecom in the Pacific is building a system along with Telin in Indonesia called SEA, Southeast Asia US, which goes from Indonesia to the Philippines to Hawaii to Guam to the western seaboard of the United States. We have some other customers that are building out in markets like Guam, Saipan, as well as Cambodia, the MCT system, Malaysia, Cambodia, Thailand. Our client anchor customer there is EasyCom. So we're not very well known in this part of the world from the United States. I'm happy to give you an American perspective. Don't really come to Dubai, but we specialize really in Asia, in South America, as well as in Africa.
Good,
so,
good.
And
Thank
it's a pleasure
you.
to be here.
Thank you. Well, the reason for having an introduction for everyone, above and beyond letting you know who they are, is this panel is going to address traffic growth, data traffic growth, things of that nature. As you can tell, everyone on this panel is intimately involved in that business. So I'm going to start and just do some general open questions, get your ideas about what's happening in the marketplace, how you all are addressing those kinds of things, so on and so forth. And I'm going to start here. Can you tell us about how much bandwidth growth is affecting your operations? Nice general question. Mike, I'll let you start.
Thanks, Jeff. I think, at the end of the day, we're all facing completely off the scale bandwidth growth. I mean, I think that's a statement of the obvious. We're all wrestling with that. I think what is very interesting is that what it's driving us to do more than anything else, because it's caused us to really re-examine the entire approach that we have to our network architecture, to what's driving that and so on, and to go right back, I suppose, to the core sort of source of those drivers as well. So if we look at some of the stats that we're actually seeing, you look, the two things that are really driving, obviously one is video, and I think we see the impact of video. There's typically about 70% of the total growth is coming, traffic that's sitting on the net right now is coming from video. We also see the growth in mobile, and we see it very interesting to see the shift in, for example, video on mobile versus video on other devices, and there's some very interesting stats in that in terms of seeing the shift over the next sort of 5 years, seeing the growth from, I think I had it down as 15% projected to go to 43% coming from smartphones, tablets, that kind of thing, versus things like PCs and TVs that are sort of PCs coming down from 53% to 29%, TVs 30% to 25%. So we see this entire sort of engineering of consumer behavior and how that's now feeding its way back into the network. So from that point of view, what we've had to do is to say, well, how do we address that? Because we can't just keep on building infrastructure indefinitely and infinitely. We're obviously investing a lot of cables and so on, but that's driven us really towards SDN, NFV, orchestration, trying to link up with partner networks as well, so that we can actually make ourselves more efficient, because we're being driven to deliver not just better price points, greater efficiency, but a completely different product. Our customers want to buy in different increments. They have different buying behaviors. We've had to adapt our entire go-to-market strategy and our entire network engineering approach to actually match that. So it's had a fundamental effect right the way through the complete delivery channel.
Good, good. Kevin, you deal a lot with the standards associated with this and so on. Can you give us your insight on that?
Yes, obviously not speaking from an operator perspective, but I do spend a lot of time with operators, and maybe I'll answer the question a little bit differently. What are they doing to address the bandwidth growth? I think what we're seeing are major trends towards being able to provide the bandwidth on demand, the connectivity on demand, whether it's a cloud, access to the cloud, or whether it's just enterprise connectivity between locations, adding a location. But in general, enterprises are having a hard time predicting exactly what bandwidth they need for new applications and what the growth curve would be. So, the operators are trying to be able to provide a big pipe, a bigger access pipe with an ability to start smaller on that pipe and then burst. Right. So a lot of the work we do is just enabling all of that to happen. How do you technically make the network, add capacity to a circuit, eventually being able to have, for example, even an application tune the network on the fly, on demand, that kind of thing. So I think it's just, and you see all sorts of announcements coming out from major operators like AT&T with their on-demand services, and Orange, and there's a bunch of examples around the world where everybody's trying to be able to make the whole network, turn it on faster, make it more elastic.
Sure. Jasmin, how about it do?
Yeah, actually, I would like to start from the foundations of building a network. The traffic is booming. There is a lot of bandwidth demand from the customers. Customers are so hungry in terms of bandwidth. So we started in Du by building our fiber optic network, starting from the day of our launch in 2007. This is the foundations of providing a very high speed access toward your customers. It is your foundation in providing terabits of bandwidth when it comes to the core. So we are covering almost 80% of our network with fiber footprint. And from there, we started adding on the equipment that provide you with high capacities. Now, moving forward, I think with the high demand, it's not feasible anymore to keep adding hardware because the cost of ownership is becoming so high. So now I think it's the new era for us, and looking into SDN, looking into NFV, to capitalize over that fiber infrastructure that was built several years back.
Right. Good.
And that made us so capable in providing 1 gig to home. We were the first in the region to provide 1 gig to home. We have announced recently that we can provide 20 gig to home as well. And all of that is because we have a proper fiber footprint on ground.
Good. Fahd, how about you? Operating your system, I'm sure you see quite a bit of growth.
Yeah, we've actually seen a tremendous growth, and to be honest, we're very happy about it.
Sure.
As a data wholesaler, nothing pleases our board better than to consume more and more. But operationally, of course, it does provide us a bit of challenge. Being a neutral cable operator and not being part of a consortium allows us the flexibility to add on very rapidly capacity requirements when you're talking about hundreds of gigs or tera of capacity, because the provisioning lead time is very rapid. It does keep our CEO up at night, CTO actually. I don't know if he's here, Dan, but we used to joke that he lost all his hair coming into GBI working for us. But the point here is that even though organically we're very well able to meet the bandwidth demands, there is a point of diminishing return on the per megabit price. So whereas 3 years ago you'd be selling an X bandwidth of capacity, you may be selling 3 or 4 times more, but the unit rate has dropped significantly. And that has really changed our view, moving towards a more innovative model. As GBI, we've moved away from the concept of bandwidth wholesaling into a dominion of managed services, moving to the cloud. Now, we're not there yet. We've taken certain steps to getting there. We've had some reasonable successes. I believe last year we launched our IP transit number, AS200-612, which currently has got about 100 million eyeballs on its network. We're one of the fastest growing transit providers. And the bandwidth growth is there, but we have to innovate along the same lines. We've moved along to IP services, towards managed services, and as we'll continue the discussion, we'll talk a little bit more about the more innovative features around what GBI is modeled. So today as we stand, I believe we're able to handle raw bandwidth without a problem. It's those varying demands and the non-stop networking and always available demand from the applications that is giving us a bit of a hard time. And again, we've adapted to that by opening our doors to building our network out. So if you look at the GBI network today and look at the maps that we've got, 2013 there was a single string of cable connecting the Gulf to Europe. Today you will have multiple systems invested. We've actually got fiber in the desert in the GCC. We've got investments in capacity on the BBG. We've actually invested on third-party cables. For us, we're agnostic. Our goal is to deliver a customer service, whether it's buying a competitor cable, it doesn't really matter. So the outlook of GBI today is completely different than it was before. The challenge that we always will continue to have is meeting those customized demands of our clients who want more than just the traditional bandwidth service.
Good. Eric, you deal with submarine systems all over the world. Can you tell us what you're seeing?
Yeah, APTelecom is not an operator. We advise clients in the subsea space. We also advise clients in high-frequency trading network on HFTN, low-latency systems, people like Spread, Vigilant, McKay, in markets like New York, Frankfurt, Paris, Amsterdam, Montreal. Just from a non-sales sort of perspective, I think from an American point of view, there's a difference between data And it may not have reached the Middle East yet, but let me give you a US perspective. Not all data is created equal. Netflix, during peak traffic, constitutes roughly 80%, maybe even more, 85% of the traffic at peak times, say from 6 p.m. to 10, 11 p.m. with kids and wife and husband, everybody watching TV, different devices. But they only constitute 2% of the revenue on the internet. So I don't know how that's a healthy business. So you're paying 80% of your network for a company that only makes up 2% of the revenue on the internet. Whereas Amazon only is taking up, say, 3 to 4% of the actual traffic consumption, but is making anywhere from 30 to 35% of the revenue on the internet. There's an imbalance. And we see, from APTelecom's perspective, at least in the United States, starting on the western seaboard in California, something that probably will continue on a global basis, is that there will be a classification of data, whether it's first, business, or economy. That's going to happen, and it's in the process of happening. Whether it happens under the new administration that's going to come into power in January, Trump with Telecom, remains to be seen, but he seems to be fairly laissez-faire. But there is a feeling, at least in the United States, that if you're using a device like Periscope, which is UGC, user-generated content, your Periscope content, which may be you and your friends cooking at home, is probably not as valuable as somebody doing e-commerce, okay? Right. You're going to have to make a decision as to what gets prioritized from a packet basis. And that decision is going to be made because at some point, people like GBI invested billions or millions, hundreds of millions of dollars, and their investors want to know, did they get the return or not? And that's a fair question as an investor. If you don't get that question, you don't get that return, you're actually going to hurt the industry. You're not going to see investment. So at some point, we're going to see a classification, at least in APTelecom's view, of data and how that data is prioritized based on the need of what the data is being used for, whether it's for social media, whether it's for kids, what we like to call teeny boppers in the US, people that are on Instagram, that maybe the traffic is important to the 16-year-old kid uploading a photo of his friends, but in fact, it's not really priority critical in terms of packet exchanges or some sort of e-commerce is happening on it.
Sure. Good points. You know, that leads us into the next question. What suggestions do you have for projecting bandwidth growth in these times of explosive bandwidth usage? And you alluded to one there about differentiation in the types of data that flow in over the network. Any other inputs you can give us, Eric, on that?
Yeah, I think if you look at globally as well as in the US, and again, I'm not an expert on the GCC region, but I would say this, that operators are not purchasing capacity the way they used to. Okay, the way they used to buy a lease or they used to buy an IRU. Okay, very inefficient. It's not a good way to build equity. In fact, it's probably the worst thing you can do because what happens is as your needs scale, because you have economies of scale and you have growth, exponential growth of the data, you need to go out and procure more and more and more and more. So operators like PCCW Global, other operators, they started investing in consortia systems, whether it's AE1 or other systems. But there is a classification of operators that are not investing in systems as a direct owner. They're being called what we refer to in the industry in a subsea perspective or a fiber terrestrial perspective as shadow investors. Those shadow investors are riding on the coattails of primary investors. They get the same benefits and the same rights as the primary consortia investors, but effectively they're using what are called upgrade rights. So they're able to upgrade their capacity in a mechanism which enables them to scale accordingly, and they have cost-based economics. Now, there are people that may not be well-schooled or well-versed or lack the subject matter expertise, but one of the trends that at least APTelecom sees is that more people are building equity when they buy. They're not buying leases, or if they're buying leases, they're converting them to IRUs with the ability to capitalize that lease or that IRU with upgrade rights. So they're paying cost plus 3, plus 5, plus 10%. And that trend's going to continue. The days of people just buying leases and then renewing leases or buying more, I think those days are over. We're going to see a much more sophisticated buyer to scale to meet the projected needs of what bandwidth's going to be by 2020 and 2025.
Right. Fahd, what do you see in that regard?
Adding on what Eric has talked about, we're actually one of those smart buyers in terms of buying that consortium system. In BBG, our investment is sort of a shadow investment, and that gives us great bandwidth capacity at a fraction of the buy-in price. what I see in the region, or what we see in the region today in the Gulf, we're coming towards that sort of smart buyer, but at the moment, the clients we've seen still buy into leases, they still buy into IRUs for whatever reason. It's the way they operate, and that's fine for the way it is, but within our infrastructure and our ability, we have the flexibility to do a lot of on-demand services. And as a wholesaler, the approach that we've had and we've been successful in is we work with our customers, and I should really say our partners, because the model that GBI has is we work with our partner to help him secure more business, whether that's for his enterprise client or whether it's for his organic network build-out. By working closely with them through the foundation stage till the implementation stages, we found that we've always have a very high success rate. And I believe that's the way we can approach our customers' needs, by working closely with them through the RFP process, through understanding their requirements, rather than just say, hey, here's a bit of capacity, here's the IRU, here's the lease price, go do what you want with it. We've had tremendous amount of success in the close quarters approach.
Good, good. Jasmin.
Yeah, from a telecom provider view, I think the bandwidth will never go down for a lot of reasons. First of all, people lifestyle have changed with smartphones. They are used to share a lot of videos, a lot of photos. So we don't see anything that will take that down. Plus, with the 5G coming, a lot of IoT and Internet of Things needs to be connected with each other. Especially here in Dubai, there are a lot of use cases where you need to connect a lot of smart systems, where you need to connect a lot of sensors. So bandwidth will keep increasing. Specifically with a lot of use cases that we are studying and seeing, we don't see any trend that will bring that bandwidth down. So that's why we are really working hard day and night to prepare our infrastructure to host all of those coming services through the coming years.
Good, good, okay. Kevin, any insight on that from a MEF perspective on your dealings with other operators?
No, only, and I'm not a overly technical person. Again, it's if you put a more sophisticated overlay in the form of an orchestration capability on top of the services that are being sold, underneath you put a more flexible fabric with a software-defined infrastructure, a virtualized infrastructure, you give yourself a lot of opportunities to manage that bandwidth differently. For example, we're seeing a huge interest in SD-WAN offerings by service providers, and we're actually working on use cases right now where the data can be moved from a private MPLS or carrier Ethernet network to the internet, back and forth, depending on performance. So one way of preparing for the bandwidth explosion is just being able to manage it better, as opposed to traditionally, and this is certainly an issue with wholesale, where there's a lot of excess capacity sitting there. If you look at the wholesale model, when I buy, I'm a tier 1 operator, and I have to buy a last mile, and I can't see any, I have no visibility into the other endpoints and so on. I usually end up buying more capacity, or I have to buy the highest level of quality of service to deal with that last mile connection. So I'm probably spending more money than I need to.
Yeah. Mike, how about you? PCCW obviously is a very large network.
Sure, we've got a large network, and I think, again, if I go back to some of the points you made earlier, and in fact Eric touched on some of the key points when he was speaking. If you look at what's actually, okay, to start with, it's almost impossible to predict network growth. Okay, so it actually drives a completely different set of behaviors. It actually says, right, who is driving it, what's driving it? We see, for example, and again, we have, for example, the big OTT players, particularly the guys all down the west coast of the United States, are big customers of ours. But perhaps unusually, also their equivalents coming out of Asia, coming out of China, are equally big users of ours. Because each of them is, if you like, the West Coast guys are trying to get into Asia, the Asian guys are trying to get into the Western world, and so on. And I think we're somewhat uniquely straddling that. And so we're getting this sort of, if you like, tsunami of bandwidth demand coming our way. But what is interesting is that the buying patterns and behaviors are changing. Those guys are behaving and buying as if they were carriers, as if they were wholesale providers in their own right. But they're actually demanding greater flexibility at the same time. So they want to buy. I mean, we had a situation where one particular player was entering China. Couldn't really predict what the take-up was going to be. Didn't want to buy huge amounts of capacity just in case.
Right.
So they were quite prepared to enter into a deal which effectively was a variant on a pay-per-use basis. Okay, so we were able to take the risk on that, if you like, because we have such a large infrastructure. They got the flexibility that they were looking for in terms of a market entry strategy, and both of us won. And I think, and that's to some extent, that whole experience and what we saw there is driving our deployment, as we've all been talking about, in terms of software defining the network, virtualizing it, orchestration, actually linking different players together. Because what we want to be able to do as well is be the easiest to do business with. Sure. So from that point of view, if you suddenly have a changing business demand and you want to be able to ramp that up quickly without having this huge, upfront committed investment and then bring it back down again when circumstances change. We want to be able to do that. But that means that we have to have a very open, very collaborative approach with every other partner that we work with. And that is driving all sorts of interesting challenges along the way, because obviously the more open you become, the APIs are being opened up, but that also means that you're actually opening up potential security issues, and so on and so forth, so you've got to basically take that into account as there is more and more of a move into private clouds and then public clouds. Each again of those is changing the usage pattern, the bandwidth take-up, but it's also changing the security profile. So each of those things are very interrelated, and we're basically working on all of them to answer your original question, how do we predict it? We try to be the most flexible, open, and secure environment possible.
I liked your example of your one client who wanted to have flexible bandwidth going into China. Do you see any other similar type applications that come up?
Happening all the time.
Is something you could give us an example of?
No, I can't give you all an example. But I mean, the truth of it is it's coming more and more. And that's why I say, I mean, we also have a lot of interactions. I'm also part of we're members of a number of industry groupings, across the wholesale environment, all the major players. And what is interesting is, sitting around the table, sharing experiences, sharing challenges, all that kind of thing. And certainly, I think what we then do is we tend to invite these big OTT players and so on to come and talk to us, kind of in a closed environment as to what they're looking for. And they're all kind of saying the same thing. They're saying, look, we need greater flexibility from you. Mm-hmm. Because we'd rather you did it, all right? Because in practical terms, we're not in the network build business. Right. But if you guys don't listen to us, then you force us to get into the network building business. And you can see, the likes of Google and Facebook and so on are actually starting to actually physically invest in infrastructure. But as I say, they're actually quite open. They're saying, look, guys, it's not first prize. If you're able to give us the flexibility that we need, at the price points we need, the ability to grow as partners, collaboratively, we'd much rather be doing that. And I think that's a challenge that the entire wholesale industry has really got to face up to, is that these are the drivers of major bandwidth growth at the moment.
So in other words, change the mindset.
Absolutely.
Innovative and collaborative.
And right the way through the industry supply chain as well. Sure. Because we're all, that's the reality of the wholesale environment, is that we're all interdependent. We're all interoperating all of the time. But now this is automating it, and it's demanding that we're actually more open. One of the key challenges is we were all able to sort of operate our own little silos. They're interconnected at certain discrete points and discrete points only. Now we're actually opening the whole shooting match up, and that brings a whole set of new challenges. But if the truth of it is that I believe this is one of the fundamental shifts that we're facing in the industry at the moment. If we don't shape up to that, then actually we will see that the control over the network moves to players that are able to actually deliver that
Sure.
flexibility.
Sure, I would agree. Jasmin, did you have a?
No.
Okay. One of the things that's that's a hot button in today's business out there is the cloud. Connection to the cloud, being a cloud provider, all of the above. And can you give the audience here some insight into what you see as to connections going through, say, PCCW or each of you, as to what you're seeing from customers, what they want, what they demand? I mean, a lot of them want to make sure they come to you and you can connect them to all three of the major clouds and all that kind of stuff. Any insight that you'd give the audience? Mike?
Yes, I think you, first of all, you touched on correctly, is that customers are looking for, again, freedom of choice, flexibility, and so on. And that, to be honest, is relatively easy to do. You mentioned three, but we're seeing actually the growth coming out of, again, China as well. Right. And it's interesting how these sort of, little ecosystems are coalescing and so on. And so but as I say, I think one of the key things that it's doing, as I said a little while ago, is it's actually creating new challenges, because as you virtualize everything, as you create different touch points between the private network environment and this public environment, you're opening up different security holes. And so one of the key things is that they're saying, well, look, we need you to actually build in that kind of protection. So it's moving the responsibility from the enterprise to the operator, to the cloud provider, and they're saying, look, we need different levels of protection, different levels of security in order to be able to actually make comfortable use of that. So on the one hand, you're seeing some big success stories. I was reading not so long ago, GE, General Electric, for example, is moving up to 9,000 of their applications into the public cloud, not even the private cloud, but public cloud. But they're actually laying down very specific stipulations to the cloud providers as to what they will do, how they'll do it, and so on and so forth. So we see that kind of movement coming back to us as wholesale operators, saying, well, as we interconnect to each of those, how do we actually make sure that we can protect them, provide that level of security? So for example, we've implemented anti-DDoS capabilities across the entire network. But one of the key advantages as well from a point of view of being a global network connected to all of the cloud players is that you have the breadth of vision of all potential risks, all potential threats. You see trends and so on. So for example, we have products like our Moderator product, which effectively is non-intrusive. It monitors trends across our entire network, every connected device, matches it up algorithmically to a database of threats. So there's a threat management system sit in there, and then predictively and proactively alerts customers to what is likely to be happening, and then enables that to be to be responded to and to be mitigated. So again, building all of that into this integrated environment. So it's no longer just a network and a cloud provider and so on and so forth, but it's becoming an integrated ecosystem with security being one of the fundamental core premises.
Good point, good point. Kevin, what are you seeing out there in your dealings with?
Well, there's just a tremendous amount of innovation happening in a short period of time here. Now, if you could just come back to the wholesale example, it's not uncommon for buyer. If I'm buying a service from a last mile provider, if I've not done business with them before, if I don't have an E&I in place, it could take months and months before you finally get the connection up and you get some sort of circuit up and running, and that's just not acceptable in the cloud space. And we hold this event every year. We had it about a month ago. It's an annual conference, about 1,000 people. It's completely focused on the migration of services from static to dynamic. We had about 14 proof of concepts demos. Quite a number of them were showing inter-carrier automation. So for example, we had an enterprise with a portal interface to carrier number one, and that enterprise was able to turn up services through 3 different APIs, through 3 different carriers, and into Amazon Web Services to get some type of something running on a VM there. And it all happened in seconds or a couple of minutes or something like that. So we're seeing a huge trend towards that, and because you just can't. The thing is, what we're trying to do is essentially enable the carriers to become cloud exchanges. providing the interfaces between, so a standard, you can have a standard-based interface between a cloud provider and a carrier, between providers, from the provider to the enterprise, and so on and so forth, right? So whether you're serving an enterprise that wants to, operate their own network as a service, or some sort of content or cloud provider, you don't always have to go down a proprietary route to do that.
Good, good. Jasmin?
Good. What we have been seeing in the last couple of years, and specifically here in UAE, a lot of big enterprises and a lot of banking sectors and government sectors have realized and they need to shift to the cloud. They need to reduce the cost of ownership because that costs them a lot. And it is not their core service to provide such services. So the good thing, in several years back, we have built 2 state-of-art data centers, which is called Khazna. It's a tier 3+ data centers. And from there, we have started our journey in providing cloud services to big enterprises, to provide cloud services for federal governments there. Starting from such a proper facility, then starting from such proper data center and service delivery platforms, and having a proper orchestration tool in your hand can give that service toward your customer and provide them the real benefits and confidence to shift to the cloud. It's a major shift in the industry because even internally, a lot of customers, they have a lot of debates within their IT systems and IT departments, and they will start losing a lot of power of managing that network. So imagine that comes today to the telecom provider. So you should provide the proper environment in order for those customers not have any excuse not to come, which we have done. And today we have a huge number of customers running in our cloud, and this business is really growing and catching up within our company.
Oh, I imagine. Fahd, how about over at GBI?
Right. So I've been hearing about cloud for the past 10 years, and we used to often joke, the cloud is cloudy. Yeah. But today I think it's a lot more mature in the region, talking about from a Gulf region perspective, and I've seen a lot of local operators building out their own cloud infrastructure like Do. Other operators are doing it. You also have managed service providers, the niche players building out their own cloud implementations. And I really can't talk a bit about that, but I can talk about what I see from a global connectivity perspective towards the cloud.
Sure.
While these regional data centers and cloud data centers can cater to certain customer requirements, there's still some customers who want to move out to the hyper cloud platforms for economies of scale, for cost points, whatever reasons they've got, the availability of service and the flexibility. And a trend that I've seen in the last year is that traditionally the connectivity would be over the public internet, and that would work well for most or certain type of applications. But as they move towards more mature applications, those applications that need a deterministic, always-on connectivity, basically a dedicated connectivity service, that is something they couldn't do over the internet, and they've moved on to providers like GBI to provide a sort of solution. So in the interim, I believe in the landscape, as a global wholesale bandwidth provider, we can cater to those customers who want to connect to the Microsofts, to the Googles, to the Amazon Web Services, and other IBM software and other providers globally. But there will come a time when the economy of scale shift significantly, so those large cloud players are going to start investing in the region. There may be talks of this already. I believe you will see announcements coming in soon. And that will be a game changer and a challenge for both the local operators and also an opportunity to collaborate with them. From our point of view, we're more of an enabler for the cloud services. So we provide the infrastructure, the connectivity, and working with certain licensed providers, work with them towards the data center space and provide as you would say, the platform to develop the cloud platform. The network, the co-location space, the connectivity to connect all the countries together. And I think that is an area that we're investing in strongly in the near future from GBI perspective.
Good. Thank you. Eric, how about at APTelecom?
Yeah,
what kind of trends?
We advise a lot of our clients around the world. Selling bandwidth, selling access is not a good business model. you find very, very few. I can't even count on my one hand, with any fingers in my hand, how many wholesale providers only there are in the world on any routes, whether it's the Atlantic, the Pacific, South Pacific. Selling bandwidth is extremely difficult because of Moore's Law. I went, second time here in Dubai, I went skiing at this mall. The indoor mall was great. So if you like skiing, man, you love the bandwidth business. It goes downhill only, never goes up. The problem with the bandwidth business is because of Moore's Law. The computing power is doubling every 18 months. You have price erosion. You have a fixed cost base, but you have a declining asset base. We advise a lot of our clients, whether they're in Norway, which I'm going to after this conference to Oslo, or whether Iceland, or in the South Pacific in Australia or New Zealand. If you're going to build a cable, consider building a data center on top of it. Because we'll take Hong Kong, for example. I lived in Hong Kong for 8 years. And I remember in 1996, the cost of a rack in Hong Kong at Telecom House in Wan Chai, or in Chai Wan at Mega I Advantage, was about $500 US for the rack per month. Now that same rack is about $3,000 a month. So it's gone up by 6 times, okay? I don't know any route anywhere in the world where bandwidth has gone up by 6 times. It's gone down by 6 times. So it behooves the operator to get into the storage business in addition to the transmission business, because the transmission business is a necessary evil. You need it, but you need to be able to offer transmission as part of the network component, but the actual hardware where you're storing it, okay, needs to be somewhere where the asset base is appreciating. That's more of a real estate play.
Sure.
The last point that I would say is that something that hasn't been mentioned on the panel is ambient temperature. Weather plays a very key role in terms of where you deploy data centers, okay? It's not the CapEx cost to deploy the data center. It's not the one-time charge. It's the OpEx. So if you go to places like Oslo, and it's going to be colder than Dubai when I go on the plane tonight, but those places in the Scandinavia, Nordic region, Iceland, they're very ideal because they can open the window and it's nice and cool large part of the time. I think there is an inherent challenge to certain parts of the world because it's just warmer. So whether you're deploying in Middle East or in Europe or South America or North America or Asia, you have to pick a location that your power efficiency rating is optimized, because that's a large part of your OpEx, your cost. And a lot of the companies that were mentioned, whether it's Microsoft or Facebook or Google or Amazon, for good or bad, California and Washington State is a fairly, what we like to call blue states. They don't vote for Trump. They're very CSR, they're green in terms of what they do. And their corporate social responsibility, the CSR, is a very important component. And a lot of the people in their constituency where they work and live, in particular places like California, they believe in green power. They believe in global warming. So for them, they want to create a data center of the future that's not going to use old-style energy resources. They want to use renewables, whether that's wind, geothermal, power, solar, you name it. So that's an important criteria that a lot of the internet concept providers, ICPs, particularly in the West Coast of the United States, look at when they're looking at deployment. How can they be corporate, social responsible in deploying this? Because everybody loves to blame the airlines. They love to blame the aviation industry. But unfortunately, the telecom industry is a very big contributor to greenhouse emissions. Right. Now, whether you believe or not believe, this is, this is, I guess, debatable, at least to some people. I do believe personally, I think the water level is rising, and I think we have a responsibility to help the planet, as well as a lot of people do on the west coast of the US. So this is some of the criteria that you have to look at when you deploy a data center.
Good. Well, thank you. Well, listen, I want to thank this panel. What a great panel. Let's give them a round of applause here. And we've heard a lot of good insights about today's industry, where we're going, what we're doing, and I appreciate it. Thanks to all of you.